Yeah, it didn't really click. I think it was a bit of a lifestyle shock. I mean, you're 18 and you're like, why is that big pile of washing not getting smaller? Those jobs that you do when you're 16, 17, 18, it's like, it really sets you up for a bit of ambition. The composer came out with a big mop of hair and starts to wave his wand around, and they just couldn't handle it. And I struggled as well, but I managed to just keep it under control.
Today's guest, hailing from Wigan, embodies the resilience of the working class. His journey from college to internships in Berlin and eventually breaking into the London industry reflects his unwavering determination. Despite initial setbacks, he thrived as a freelancer, prioritising client relationships over financial gain. Now, he champions diversity in the industry, embodying the tenacity and adaptability of his roots. So Danny, welcome. How was that for an intro? Was that okay?
Thanks very much, James. Yeah, very nice intro. Yeah.
Would you say it's pretty spot on?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sum things up in a few words.
Yeah, before we crack on, could you just let us know and the viewers what it is you do and briefly?
Yeah. So yeah, try and keep it short. My current work is mostly motion graphics, design work, moving image for agencies, branding agencies, and some ad agency work and some broadcast work, and a background in sort of filmmaking and directing and editing. I try and bring it all together in my current motion design work, which combines 2D and 3D graphics.
The purpose of this series is kind of just to get the voice of the working class out there. And one of the first questions I always ask is, how would you define it? What would you say working class is to you?
I think it's a big subject and a deep subject. I mean, you can sort of reduce it or you can explode it open. I find it a really interesting subject. I think my understanding of it as coming from Wigan is working towns that have some sort of industrial background, and the populations that come from those places and now sort of post-industrial towns and cities, where those populations sort of still live and work and exist, and then everything that sort of means for the people that come from those places, from cultures, ways of living, ways of speaking, ways of working, ideologies, connections to historical contexts and stories and the past, and how that affects the future. I find it a really interesting subject.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's such a broader term for yourself based on the answer that you just gave. I think, based on the interviews I've done, I think some people really hone in on specific areas, but I think based on your answer, it's a much broader thing for you. Is that what you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can look at it from many angles. I guess in the context of your interviews and podcast, it's the context of how we end up in certain professions and certain careers and industries, the journey there, and then also how that sort of plays out during how you find yourself in certain jobs, offices, mixtures of people and backgrounds. But yeah, for me, there's definitely more to it. Interestingly, listened to an interview with an old mate of mine. She's an artist, and she's just written she just released a book, first novel. And I listened to her on the radio yesterday. She was chatting about accents in the north and how they change so fast. You can just in a few miles, the accents can change so much. And she did this train journey across the north, and she spoke about humour as well, and this sort of it's this interweaving of accents, sort of working classness and humour, and sort of mockery, and how that all fits together.
Yeah, let's go back to your roots. You mentioned you were from Wigan, and I think it is a predominantly working class town, isn't it? Could you tell us a little bit about your early years and then moving into like education and basically how you end up into the industry that you're in now?
Yeah. I went to state school, Catholic school, and I was always into art and design. So I sort of pursued that through to sixth form, where I continued art and graphics. And tell me if I'm going too quick around
No,
these.
it's fine. Just carry on. Because could you tell us a little bit about your influences on growing up? Was there a particular reason you wanted to go into art industry?
I don't think so. I just remember it being something that I enjoyed, something that I had a natural inclination towards. Love drawing, love painting, ideas, making worlds, this sort of thing, but also discovering artists and designers that I was lit up by, got really into, and then I think I liked this sort of practice of being around other people doing that stuff as well.
Yeah,
And it's a bit less regimented than maths class
yeah.
or science. I think from memory, it's just something that I always felt like interested in and lit up by, I suppose. And that sort of continued by me pursuing that to sixth form, whilst also keeping some sort of proper subjects in play.
What were
So
those?
I did maths, business, biology, as well as fine art and graphics.
Was there a particular reason why you kind of wanted to do the
I
proper
mean,
subjects as such?
sort of parental, societal suggestions that um, you'll never make a living in art and creative stuff. So sort of tie it back to something that is proper.
Yeah.
That was a sort of maths and
Do you think
business.
do you think that kind of stems back to the kind of like working class mentality? Do you think that would be like that like your parents would be thinking you need to have something kind of secure and safe?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's the simple fact that unless you've got a load of money from somewhere, most artists find it difficult to sort of find sustenance from their art. And this sort of went through to, and I mean, let's face it, there's not that many for every Damien Hirst. There's millions of non-Damien Hirsts. And so, that was always a factor for me, is like, if you can combine it somehow with something a bit more commercially viable or career oriented or vocational, then that's probably something to veer towards.
We've talked about before how you went to Coventry Uni and then you left there. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know you mentioned maybe you getting thrown in the deep end, going to uni at such a young age, and then going to another university. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I went straight to Coventry Uni straight up from sixth form. So I was 18. Obviously, a lot of kids go to uni at 18. But yeah, I managed to get onto automotive design, which was quite a prestigious thing. Most kids had to, I'm guessing still do, go through Art Foundation, whether that's at Coventry or at the uni where you're studying or elsewhere. And yeah, I managed to get straight in. So that was like, I remember this sort of strong feeling of it's happening. This is sort of a good thing. And so yeah, I moved there. And yeah, it didn't really click. I think it was a bit of a lifestyle shock. I mean, you're 18 and you're like, why is that big pile of washing not getting smaller?
Yeah.
And yeah, I suppose it was a bit of it was a lot at that age. And I mean, I engaged with the course, but the way that I was engaging with it was probably not aligned with the requirements.
Yeah.
I just remember sort of making more sculptural stuff
Yeah.
rather than
Technical.
form and function.
Yeah.
And so although some people sort of appreciated some of the stuff I did, it was like, oh, this is kind of cool, but it doesn't answer the brief. And so I struggled a bit with that, as well as the sort of life, the moment of life and moving away and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, after a year, it became before then, it became quite clear that it wasn't right for me. And so yeah, decided to move back home and start foundation back in Wigan, which felt a bit, I suppose, there was an element of failure, but I think the next year was really good for me.
How were your parents with that? Because obviously, you going to university is always good for like parents. They're proud of you going to uni, but then you going back to Wigan and doing the foundation. How were your parents with all of that?
Yeah, I can't remember loads of details, but I think they were supportive. I think they could see that whatever was going on in Coventry wasn't right for me, and that I just maybe needed some time. And yeah, moving back home for a year sort of gave me that. So yeah, dead supportive, and it just allowed me to kind of, I suppose, find my feet, find a bit of confidence, because I think I was kind of a bit burnt by it. This sort of, it felt like failure, sort of still does to some extent, that I didn't stick it out. Feel this is quite not a working class thing.
No, I think it's perfectly valid, because I think sometimes, even though you strive to be the best that you are, sometimes you're just not in the right place at the right time. And I think sometimes your mindset, because for me personally, I took a year out before going to uni because university wasn't a thing that I was really interested in. But yeah, I was working in retail, and then I was like, oh, I can't be doing this. Like, no disrespect to people that do day to day, but for me, I was like, I needed something more. And I think for me, I needed that year out doing something, and then I made me realise. And I suppose that's the same for you, like taking that year back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of moving home as well was that I got my job back at Asda, where I was stacking shelves and doing the odd night shift. Which, I mean, this is a common story from my wife and lots of peers. It's like those jobs that you do when you're 16, 17, 18, it's like it really sets you up for a bit of ambition, because you're like, it's clear that you might not want to do this forever. Some people do, and that's fine. But it sort of wakes you up to the fact that you might have a bit of ambition, and maybe there's something else that you can pursue. Especially at that age, kind of world's your oyster.
Mm.
And so yeah, it kind of combined with that.
So
Going back home.
yeah, so you went home, you did your foundation year, and then you went on to, was it Leeds Met?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just time to reconsider what it was that I wanted to move into. And yeah, ended up at Leeds Met doing it was called Contemporary Creative Practice at the time. I think it's now, I don't even know if it exists anymore, but it moved on to Contemporary Art Practice. But yeah, it's basically contemporary art that is kind of fine art, but without the classical stuff, the painting, the sculpture, the drawing. It was much more like embracing new technologies, film, audio, motion graphics, and so yeah, ended up in Leeds doing that.
Yeah, and because you went to Leeds, was this the opportunity that gave you the internship at Berlin, right?
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think after first year was it? Oh no, it was second year. So yeah, I'd done 2 years at Leeds. I'd started sort of building up a body of work, pretty wacky performance stuff.
How did you find that opportunity? What was, how
The
did you approach
internship.
it? Yeah, but how did you approach it?
I'd gotten into like lifestyle magazines, so I was. It was clear that I was enjoying the Leeds course, but I was still sort of interested in um, how might this quite open art practice end up in a job. I knew I wanted a job rather than pursuing life as an artist.
Mm.
Or I was certain then whether it was the right thing or not. I don't know, and maybe things constantly evolve. But so yeah, I was kind of constantly looking for how does this merge with the real world.
Yeah.
And I was into sort of lifestyle magazines, music magazines, electronic music, sort of youth culture. And I came across a magazine, or I think a lot of different magazines and websites where I just kind of cold emailed. So I probably
Mm.
sent off 20, 30, 50 of these emails, just putting out the feelers. And wait a minute, actually, yeah. So before this, the year before, I'd done an art exchange outside of Berlin. The summer before, so after the first year at uni, I was invited on this art exchange, which was sort of a month long art making in a forest with other students from around the world, which was
Yeah.
amazing. And that introduced me to Berlin because at the weekends we'd pop into Berlin. And I just love the place. So I kind of wanted to go there. And I came across some magazines, got in touch with the editor, and she basically offered me an internship
Mm.
after seeing some of my work that I'd been doing, and whatever email I'd written. And so yeah, I went to Berlin for the summer, working for two different, one lifestyle magazine that still runs, and then a small Berlin zine that was a startup, and I sort of helped get that off the ground.
Mm.
Um,
Was this kind of like the first real taste of working in industry and being away from home in the UK?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
How,
yeah. It
how,
was
how did
like,
you find it? Like,
I mean, it was a bit wild being 21 in Berlin on my own for summer. Um, During the days, I'd be working with my colleagues at the magazine, and then evenings and weekends, we were a bit kind of. I bought a stolen bike and just sort of explored the city. I didn't know it was stolen,
yeah.
but later found out that most bikes were stolen, and it was very cheap.
Mm.
But yeah, so there's this sort of like uh, bleakness, but also excitement to it, where you're
Yeah.
just exploring, meeting new people. I latched onto a few other Brits who had been there longer than me and introed me to some of their friends. So eventually, sort of built a little crew, and it was amazing. Yeah, I loved it. Lots of fun, lots of partying, but learned loads as well working. I worked with a graphic designer, and so kind of developed my graphic skills whilst knowing that I had this year back in Leeds to go to.
So would you say doing this internship has kind of put you ahead of everyone else, like on your course, for instance, going into industry because you had that experience out there?
I think, yeah, definitely. Because it was like it's something rather than nothing, and it also just allowed me to build up a bit of a portfolio. It's like, what have you got? You've got your uni work, you've got a bit of this internship work, a bit of experience, sort of shows a bit of willing, I suppose, and all that. Whether it eventually helped me into other things, I'm not sure, but certainly the skills and experience that I got from it later applied, and still do. I still sort of look back at some of the stuff I worked on over there, and some of the influences that I came across: music and fashion and graphics, and magazines and layout, and sort of punk
So
type
it's kind of
culture.
like the foundation for your working life, basically. A lot of
I
Berlin.
think so. Yeah, I often look back at it and think, yeah, that's pretty sweet. That,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I was offered a job as well. I was offered the job to stay on after that summer. So I did like 4 months, and I had 1 year left at Leeds. And
So, what made you not? Did you? I take it you didn't take the role then, or
I didn't take it. No, I attempted to. What's the word? Div,
defer?
defer. That's one.
Defer. Yeah,
I attempted to do that, and that was the plan. But by the time it came around, my contact had moved on, and that sort
yeah.
of lead had died a little bit. And
So, did you feel like you kind of you missed the boat there, or
um, maybe, uh, but I was sort of clearly wanted to finish my course.
you did your stint in Berlin, came back to Leeds, you finished Leeds, and then what did you move on to then?
So yeah, familiar story again. Back to Wigan, back to ASDA, and yeah, it was this. I mean, yeah, I think graduating, certainly like art courses, you kind of build up this bit of ego, and you're like, I'm on the cusp of something,
Yeah.
and and then yeah, it kind of the course ends, everyone leaves, and then you're like, reality is about to hit. And I'd looked into opportunities. I think I'd looked into like graphics stuff, trying to replicate what I'd managed to get in Berlin. Didn't work. So yeah, back to Asda. Did 6 months on the night shift. Obviously, that's enough to put the fire in anyone to just get out of there, escape. And so yeah, then I booked a week in London. So yeah, I'm still working as I booked a week in London, and I just stayed in some terrible hotel in Victoria, I think.
And you did this off your own back, like there was no one kind of saying, "Oh, you should be doing this." You were like,
Yeah,
I've got this drive, I need and ambition." You were like, "This is what I need to do."
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think by the most of my work at Leeds ended up being sort of performance work that I videoed, and so I'd start to build up some very basic shooting and editing skills, and I had loads of work to show, so kind of a showreel, but not in a showreel that I
Yeah.
consider a showreel now, but it was a start, and it was a bit of a sign of willing and creativity and work ethic, and so this sort of a natural connection was to sort of production houses. So yeah, film and video production. I think I did a little stint in Leeds, one or two production places. It was like a tenuous but relatively clear link to what skills have I got, how might I apply them to hopefully someone pay me for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent a week. Every morning I went to an internet cafe in Leicester Square because
That would have been the thing to do then, wouldn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Didn't have a smartphone or laptop. Maybe I had a laptop, but in a hotel you didn't have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, and I just sort of researched every morning and found sort of 10, 20 doors to knock on. I had a big envelope of printed CVs and bought some smart clothes and just went knocking on doors with varying responses. And
How did you find the responses? Because if you're physically going to these places and
yeah, I mean,
got a northern lad from Wigan,
yeah, I'll
knocking
just
on
knock on the door as yeah, hi, you're right. Just on the hunt for opportunities. I just came across your website, like your work, and just wanted to see if there's anything going at the minute. I've got a CV, I'd love to drop it off, and have a chat with anyone. And most people would just, I think, yeah, remember quite a bit of shock, like, what's
who's
guy
this
doing?
guy?
But then lots of other times sort of really welcoming and yeah, nothing at the minute, but this, that, the other. And then this led to, it was at Partisan, I think, on Lexington Street. And they put me onto the APA website, Advertising Producers Association, which has got a jobs board. So that was the key for me, really, after this week. No sort of direct opportunities or leads, but I had this website which had a jobs board which was clearly very active.
Yeah.
New stuff coming on all the time. Went back to Wigan. Within a couple of days, I secured one or two interviews for the next couple of weeks. Got the train back down, bought a fresh jacket.
Yeah.
Went to Trafford Centre with my mate. And then the first one didn't get, and then the second one I got. And
Do you know why you didn't get the first one? Was there?
Can't remember. I mean, this was at a big cinema finishing house.
Oh, right.
Which, I mean, I think the role was for a runner, so it's like, you don't really need.
It's the entry role in it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't remember if I got any feedback. Maybe I didn't have the fresh blazer for that.
Yeah.
One. So yeah, the next week I was like, that was the Trafford Centre maybe. So yeah, brushed up and yeah, pretty much got it. Yeah, on the day she said, well, yeah, appreciate the effort you've made. Come down and presentation. Can you start next week? So yeah, that was it, and then I had to figure out where to live and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, how did you navigate that? How did you figure out? Okay, I've got a job next week. I need to move from Wigan down to London. How did you navigate that?
Well, it was just quite. Yeah, it was exciting. It's kind of like it reminded me of that moment of getting the offer for Berlin. So it wasn't much nervousness. It was just excitement, really. It was like the ticket out of Asda,
yeah,
and onto whatever the world has waiting. And so yeah, and it was just kind of like tying up things. I mean, it didn't take long to. I think I kept my job at Asda for a bit. Sort of the safety net thing. That's quite a working class thing, I think. So yeah, kept that in place. So I didn't read because it
in case it failed.
Yeah, I've been working there as a student, so you don't really need to have a contract or anything like that. The next thing was find a place. I had a mate living in South London in a flat share, and he said I could go there. So yeah, my sisters drove me down the weekend following, and then I started on a Monday. Yeah.
And
And
how much did you have saved up when you moved down to London? Like,
not a lot, a couple of £100, yeah, maybe 800 quid. Maybe that was it. I think I remember my first rent, because I got kicked out of that flat that I'd been so warmly welcomed to.
yeah,
My friend forgot to inform the rest of the flatmates that I was.
sofa surfing.
Yeah, and so yeah, it was like day one. My sisters had left. I'd been in town. What was I doing? Don't know. Oh no, it was pretty much straight away. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to tell everyone, and they're not cool with it. So I think I went straight to the same internet cafe. Sounds ridiculous, but I think that's what it was then. Looking for flats instead of looking for jobs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that started straight away. I think I had about 800 quid. And yeah, that was to cover.
So was it quite a struggle when you first started out in London?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my job. I was on 10 grand for about a year, which is not enough to live in London. So yeah, my folks helped. I couldn't have done it without that. I don't think. You just can't. You can't live on that. So yeah, very fortunate to have the help from them. It's almost like not quite hardcore working class, because I've got the help from mum and dad.
Yeah, in terms of that was your first role working in London. How did you end up like navigating the other roles that you went through? Because you, like you said, you started on 10K, and how soon did you feel like, oh, I need to move on from this because financially it's not viable?
Yeah, so 10 moved up to 12. A big pay rise day. You're bumping up to 12, which felt good, to be moving on a little bit. And I'd started to train as an editor. Someone left, so I sort of moved into that role. So yeah, at least it started to build up my skills. And then I think after about 2.5 years, it moved up to 15, which still wasn't really enough. But by that point, I'd learned a fair bit of stuff and worked on quite a few jobs. So yeah, after 3 years, I was like, got to move on to move up. And so yeah, I took the risk of going freelance, and yeah, managed to make it work, and I earned some decent cash then because managed to get a decent day rate. And so yeah, although I'd not earned much in this first job, I learned loads. And
So that was more, you gained more value in actually working there than the actual financial aspect.
yeah, defo. I think at the time I was like angry that, and sort of felt blame towards the boss, but the fact is that I learned loads and worked with some amazing talents across sort of traditional stop frame animation, 3D animation, live action filmmaking. I was on shoots. I went abroad. I was sound recording. I was camera operating. I was editing. I was directing some stuff on the side for myself. So I'd started to build up skills, but also a showreel. And so yeah, with hindsight, it was like sort of a turbo 3 years because I was not earning very well.
Yeah,
I did as much overtime as possible to earn a bit more, but also because it was cheaper to be there than to.
Well, yeah, no, this is quite a common thread that I keep hearing. Like people would stay later at their workplace.
Yeah.
Because there's food left over, you get an allowance for
Exactly,
food.
Yeah.
And yes, sometimes it's better to be at the work than actually be back at your flat. It was a nicer place to be.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
quite a common thing that
Is it? Yeah,
People
yeah.
have said, yeah,
Yeah, there's normally a fridge that's got a bit of stock in it
yeah,
that you can access. Um, and yeah, they'd be like, if you worked beyond 6, you'd get your tea.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I think it was definitely like yeah, money saving. Um, but yeah, a side effect of that would be that you're learning because you're doing
Mm.
different jobs into the evening, often late. I remember just like quite regular working till like 3 in the morning on music videos or commercials or whatever it was.
Would this be you kind of trying to prove yourself, or does it kind of go back to your working class roots where, like, if I put the hours in, it will get noticed? And yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, back to your question earlier, does it put you ahead? I think, yeah, it was like anything that you can try and sort of help yourself push on a bit, I would do. So yeah, the work ethic wasn't a problem. I've always been like, yeah, uh, let's turn this into how much can we do, how fast can we do it, how well can we do it. So that was already there, and so yeah, and yeah, definitely try to prove myself. And there was a bit of a culture at this place of like, oh yeah, if you do that, then you might get access to that job, and
yeah,
what are you missing from your skill set that might get you a pay rise or whatever.
yeah,
Um, and so yeah, it was like, yeah, leveling up and skilling up, um, and yeah, I think what I didn't realize at the time, working with all these different people who have before then and since done really interesting, well-known work. Just being around them and seeing how they do things and yeah, what the process is. I remember working with a stop motion director or animator who just sort of like do this sort of performance in his head, physical,
mm.
with some props to figure out timings and like sound effects, and then he'd record it so you can figure out how long you need on the timeline.
So it's like a previs that he'd be physically doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so it was like that across many different production disciplines,
mm.
and just getting insight into all that, which I still use now. All these little things that you think you don't necessarily think that you're picking up on,
Yeah,
and so yeah, it was just absorbing all that, I suppose.
yeah. So because you end up going the freelance route, because I think it's quite the step up for someone from a working class. Because, like you said, you still had that job at ASDA as a safety net. So taking that leap of faith, going into freelance, how was that for you? And yeah, how emotionally, how was that for you? Like, how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it was scary, but I think having done these jumps before the Berlin, it's like, all right, what's going to happen? I'd also done a season in Ibiza, which I think
Mm,
um, slightly different type of work, but just putting yourself in that situation of like, all right, it's a bit scary. There's a bit of risk involved. It might fail,
mm,
but let's do it and try it out. What's the worst that can happen? Sometimes those things fail. Maybe Coventry was one of them, but even then, you learn stuff. And so by this point, it was like, I think, yeah, the freelance was like, all right, I either stay um, not earning much, and by this time, 3 years at a company, I think that was kind of enough for me. So yeah, I had friends who that I'd met through that job that were freelancers. They put me onto some agents. I
mm.
managed to get an agent straight away with my reel that I'd built up. So a combination of that and knowing a few people in the industry that I'd met through that job, and a bit of just like doggedness, I suppose,
Yeah,
and hard work and like just committing to it. Yeah, I set it all up. Just got my show reel. Probably built a little website. Started sending it out. Hit the ground running. Left, and then yeah, managed to get freelance work. And yeah, it kind of worked out.
okay. Um, because because you are freelancing and you are going from company to company, as you mentioned before with your accent. Was that something that would get kind of picked up on quite early on? Was there like a level of classism within like agencies and places that you'd work in that you would notice?
Um, I I think I forget. I remember the early days. Yeah, the early days moved to London. I quickly realised that people don't understand book,
Yeah,
Luke, and so I changed. I had to change those just to kind of like make it a bit easier to be understood.
yeah,
But apart from that, I don't. I remember having the mick taken and like a bit of mocking and stuff at later jobs and workplaces. But the first one, I don't think there was much of that. It was like it was a big mixture of different backgrounds. This is quite interesting. Yeah, it was quite different backgrounds from UK, but also different um, from across Europe and US. So it was quite a mixture
very
of
very diverse then.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
think yeah, it was really good for that. So yeah, there was a big range of accents at that job and a range of backgrounds. And what I think is great about London for that is that if there is so much diversity, then you can't really get away with being small-minded and
yeah, true.
because we're all the same. Then we're all
Mm,
different, and it's a bit boring then, sort of
yeah,
doing accents or
yeah.
whatever.
Just embrace where you're from and who you are, basically, and yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
But so yeah, I don't if I yeah I don't think I don't remember much from that job
Mm,
where it was like he's the Wiganer.
yeah,
Often Wigan's got this thing of people like to sort of say the word and reference back to it and stuff like that, but I don't think I can't remember much negative stuff. Maybe the odd sort of accent mick take, but
yeah. In jest, kind of
yeah,
between friends, kind of thing, or
yeah. But it was like it was kind of yeah that job was kind of based on merit. So yeah, it
mm.
was if you're doing the good job, then that's all that really matters.
Because you are freelancing. Did and you are going from place to place. Did you ever notice like a level of like nepotism or anything like that within companies?
Yeah, defo. I worked at an ad agency where, yeah, the international vibe was much less. So yeah, I suppose after working at a small production house, independent production house, that was really diverse. Then I did a year freelancing. So you see all the different
Mm.
places then, and that's interesting to see. And you see quite a bit of diversity that way. But then, yeah, the ad agency, it was yeah, surprisingly kind of British and not so diverse.
Mm.
So yeah, I suppose that's the first time I was like, all right, this is yeah, most people are from a relatively narrow.
Mindset kind of thing.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
geography, but I guess also with that is mindset, and then you get cliques a bit more, and um, so yeah, I don't think until then I'd not really seen much of that. It was more like it fitted better with my experience of like this sort of arty world where it's like more about what we're doing. Oh, that's
Yeah.
really interesting what we're doing. Let's do it together, rather than like yeah, who you are and
Yeah.
where you come from and stuff. Not to discredit that, but yeah, I noticed working at a bigger company like that it was a bit like right, and I was a beneficiary of a bit of nepotism when I got that job as well. Someone introduced me to
Mm.
my boss at that place, and so yeah, I was in the system then.
Yeah.
Um,
But I suppose you'd kind of already proved yourself up until that point then.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think if I hadn't had the yeah the showreel portfolio and the experience that I'd had, then I wouldn't have got
Mm.
that job. But it certainly helped to get an introduction from a kind of yeah trusted
Yeah. Do you
colleague.
feel like it's changing now? Do you feel like there is more of a diverse background within companies?
I have not had a job for about 10, as in worked in
Full
an
time,
office,
yeah.
for about 10 years now. So I did that for 3 years, then it's about 10 years since leaving there. So I don't know loads. From experience, some companies that I've worked for is sort of frighteningly, everyone's got the same accent, everyone's got the same background. And certainly sometimes I recognise that I hear my accent more than others. But no, I think there's it's. I know loads of people that tried to get into the industry and didn't, for various reasons, and I certainly think it's clearly easier for certain backgrounds, people of certain backgrounds, to get into these industries than others. Whatever that minority is, whether it's economic backgrounds or cultural background, ethnicity, or all of those things.
One of the things I think we discussed before, a story that you told me actually was quite funny about how you took your mates from Wigan to orchestra.
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think, in London it's complete. Well, you don't really get orchestra in Wigan, do you?
No, and that's I think it was my thinking. So I think I've been in London for about 6 years. This was the first time my mates got the train down to visit me, or maybe the second. I don't know. Anyway, and I, rather than going to a football game or something a bit more obvious, I was like, all right, I think they need a bit of highbrow culture. So I booked this orchestra at the South Bank. And a few drinks before, and we just into the Royal Festival Hall thing, and most of my mates from back home have got these stories of like awkward laughter in the most inappropriate situations. And so even before anything happened, they couldn't handle it. So we just sort of took our seats, and then the composer came out. It was like bombastic classics, so it's just kind of like pretty easy to enjoy classical stuff as it goes. And the composer came out with a big mop of hair and starts to wave his wand around. And they just couldn't handle it, and I struggled as well, but I managed to just keep it under control. But after about 5 minutes of them just creasing over it, laughing, two of them walked out. One came back in pretty soon. One of them couldn't handle it, and the other two just sat next to me for the whole thing, laughing their heads off all the way through. Whilst people around getting annoyed, but that's a kind of.
I was going to say, do you think this kind of stems back to like the working class side? Because you're stuck in, if you're living in Wigan and you're just stuck there, but you move down to London, you experience more culture, you see different things. Do you think if they were exposed to that kind of thing up in Wigan, do you think there'd be less of this kind of attitude and
less of that discomfort? I mean, it's like it's not necessarily that they can't appreciate the music. It's just like, I don't know how to deal with this situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you've experienced that as a kid, then there's not much to laugh at. It's just maybe enjoyable. It was a good moment, but also very awkward. Definitely a collision of worlds. It would be great if we could all have access to all of that stuff from an early age, because I think it's an interesting point and connection is if you've not been to see these musicians as a kid or as someone young enough to consider it an option in life, then clearly you're not. I don't know any sort of concert musicians from my background, as in people I grew up with. I'm sure there are, but it's much easier if you've experienced it, if it's on your doorstep, if you have family members interested in it. And so, I think it'd be good if we could all, as many kids as possible, have access to as many opportunities.
Like you said, I think unless you're given opportunities and you can see different things out there, then you wouldn't know any other way, really.
Yeah. I've been working with a young lad on our street. He's just graduated, and I helped him earlier in the year with one of his modules. And I think it's the same for it's the same now as it was then. That unless you've got these clear connections, then you kind of have to sacrifice where you live or certainly move. Definitely since COVID, I've worked from home for about 7 years now, which is great. Gives me flexibility with family life and stuff. But for young ones trying to get in, those early years where you're around people and you see the nuts and bolts and how people work and how things get done and just the range of practices as well. You kind of have to be there to do it. And the fact is, even though I've been remote for the majority of the last however long, all of my work's still in London. I've been trying to get some work in Bristol because I'm a bit close to there now, but I've still got my network from London, and that's still growing, but that's only because I've got my network there. Most things come word of mouth or introductions or that sort of thing. But I think move to the place where you want to be.
No, I think I think everything that we've talked about in this interview is really good and quite the eye-opener, especially for those that want to go the freelance route. And sometimes I think you do have to work at a company before just to get a feel for what it is to work in the industry and then go freelance. Do you have any socials or anything that people could follow you on? Do you have a portfolio online?
I'm absolutely terrible at it, but the most up to date is my Instagram. What is it?
I can put it in the description.
All right, yeah. And then website, playfunction.studio, but that is also in need of a bit of updating. It's a bit old now, but not very good at that stuff. But working on it.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for doing the chat and interview. I'll put your links in the description so Lovely. People can kind of check out your work and see what you're
Cheers,
about.
James.
So thanks again for doing this, and appreciate it.
Well, cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Initial Step. If you resonate with the stories we share and have a similar background you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch and maybe you'll be featured in an upcoming episode. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Be sure to check out our previous episodes for more inspiring stories. Until next time, we'll see you on the next one.